the deal was I was not liking who I was becoming as a person. I was finding myself to be just a little too easily able to get my own way with things and with people. And I just was just uncomfortable. Like, this is not the kind of person I want to be. So I was like, I'm just going to work this out because I want to be a different kind of human being. So I start reading books, and I don't, I'd always been fascinated with philosophy, like I said, and I don't know, I was reading Nietzsche, and I was reading Jung, and I was reading Thomas Mann, and I'm on the tour bus, and I mean, literally, it's like a line of cocaine and a page of Jung. I mean, whatever. You can edit that out if you like, or I don't care.
Why in the world would I edit
I
things
don't
out?
know.
I have a no editing out policy.
Okay, good, because I don't mind either. But anyway, I'm sort of, but I'm reading all this stuff, and the one thing that I've really not investigated in my life is religion. Very like sort of non-religious, and even though growing up in England and going to English school, you're exposed particularly to Christianity. So I knew all about religion, and the only person I knew who had any religion in their life at all was my granny. So AC/DC, granny, the two don't.
AC/DC wins.
AC/DC, life wins, not
It's
granny.
that weird thing when religion is so present that you're almost inoculated against it.
Yeah, it's you're in your
like whatever that is, it offers nothing. Okay,
yeah. I mean, I'd been to church with my granny. 6 people huddled in a smelly old building. Anyway, so I start reading, and I'm reading all of this philosophy stuff, and the philosophy, obviously, I become aware that a lot of what's said in these philosophical books is a critique of or a reaction towards or against religion. Particularly Christianity. So I'm like, what do I think about religion? Never thought about it. Maybe I should think about it. I go to Nashville, and there's a bunch of people picketing the gig. Jesus people. You're going to go to hell. I'm like, well, happily will, because you won't be there. That's our attitude. But I'm like, Christianity, what do I think about that? So I go out and I buy a Bible, and I start to read the Bible, and I am very, very not impressed. It makes no sense to me, and I literally, I start with Genesis. In the beginning, God. Don't believe that. I mean, I'm making notes. I mean, I'm serious. So, and this is a story I've only told this story publicly once. So I'll tell you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a Robcast exclusive.
A Robcast. Well, it's very important, and there's a reason why I haven't told it, because I don't think I was ready to tell it for a long time.
Yeah, I understand that.
So so I've got all these things swirling around in my head, and we're on tour. We're in San Antonio. We're staying at this hotel, and we're there for 2 or 3 days, and I meet this girl who's working at the hotel. And we have this little flirtation, but I'm not really paying that much attention. We have this little flirtation back and forth, as you do. And I come back, and I don't remember the whole thing. All I know is I came back to the hotel on my own later in the evening. So we must have played in the afternoon or whatever. And this girl is just leaving, and she says, "Oh, hey," and we have a little chat, and we have this little moment. She's like, "Do you want to come home with me?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So I go off with this girl, and we get in her car, and we drive out of San Antonio, out into the sort of suburbs and stuff. And it's kind of late by now, and we wind up at this house, and we do what you do.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, actually, we don't do what we do yet, but we start to do what we do. And she says, wait a second, I'll be right back. We're in this house, and she's like, we have to be quiet, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on, but we go into this room, and anyway, she comes back, and she says, oh, why don't you get in? So I get in bed. Anyway, to cut a long story short, before we do what we do, she says, do you mind if I pray for you? And I'm like, what? She said, no, I don't mean it that way. I just said, I don't know. She said, well, can I just pray for us before we make
what
love?
we're gonna do.
Before we do what we're going to do. And I'm like, sure. I mean, I've had weirder experiences. So I just figure I'll just chalk this one up to something. So she prays, and she prays this like full-on kind of Jesus prayer. Like, dear Jesus, thank you so much for this time. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So that happens. We do what we do. I spend the night. I get up in the morning. I walk into the kitchen, and I walk into a room full of people with guitars and Bibles having a Bible study. I spent the night with a girl who's in a Christian cult called the Children of God.
Oh my word!
And but here's the interesting thing, and this is why I've started to tell this story, because it's important. That was the first time, as an adult, I'd ever been prayed for. I'd never had an adult conversation about God or anything like that. And I was in the middle of this searchy thing, and I'm trying to work out what I think about things. And then I have this strange experience, which is, if you like to put it in contemporary religious language, carnal and yet spiritual at the same time, right? And now I've got two people in my life who have some connection to Christianity. My granny and this girl whose name actually was Comfort. You can't make it up.
You cannot make this up.
And I'm not making it up.
You cannot make this up.
But that was what made me seriously consider what I thought about Christianity. That was the catalyst. And I went, I have to get to the bottom of this, because they didn't even ask me to join their cult. They knew, I mean, I was going off, I left that town that day, never heard from them again, And it was only when I told some friends of mine afterwards that a little bit later, they all freaked out, I was like, well, it's kind of really weird. I went back to my friends, like, have a good night. And I'm like, yeah, it was kind of weird, though, because she, like, prayed for me. And they're like, she what? Because, you tell stories, but you don't usually tell those kind of stories.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Right.
But anyway, so I sort of went, okay, so what's the deal with this Jesus guy then? And that was really the beginning. And the funny thing is that part of the reason I was interested in revitalizing my humanity was because there was a part of me that didn't really like the kind of person I was coming when it came to the opposite sex and stuff like that. It's very easy when you're, and I don't want to get on some diatribe about sex and drugs and rock and roll. That's been way overdone. But it's very easy to become, when things are like gifted to you and you can just take things for granted, to become a little harder on the edges and just not, and that's what got me. That was the thing that I struggled with. So that was the kind of sort of turning point for me, and that's where I really started to like investigate. Well, what do I think about Jesus? And when I sort of started to put all this stuff together, there were other religious things that appealed to me. I didn't even really know what to think about Christianity because I hadn't really experienced it. But I had these reference points: Church of England, Granny, that kind of stuff. But I wasn't really interested in religion or God. And when I encounter my encounter with Jesus and the story, the transformative story for me was the story in the Gospels where Jesus is at the Pharisee's house, and the woman comes in and pours fragrance, and wipes his feet with her tears and stuff like that. And there's this line, and this was the line that turned me around. There's this dynamic. So, Jesus, Pharisee's house, the woman comes in, and the Pharisee says to himself, well, if this man were truly a prophet, he would know what kind of woman she is who's touching him, because she's a prostitute. And then there's this amazing line, and it says, turning to the woman, Jesus said to the Pharisee, do you see this woman? And for whatever reason, the theatrics of that, because if I look at Kristen right now and I say, Rob, do you see Kristen? Unless you're blind, or unless you choose not to see her, it's unavoidable that you see her. But I realized the Pharisee couldn't see this woman because he'd labeled her.
Yeah.
She was a prostitute, not a human being, not a broken woman, not a suffering woman. She was categorized and labeled as unclean and untouchable. And I was like, that's the person I want to be. I want to be that person, the person that doesn't put other people in boxes, label them or categorize them. That's the kind of human, literally, that was what it was for me.